"This is where my parents live," Mark suddenly declared upon his visit. Behind him, his in-laws nodded happily. I was in the middle of an online meeting and quickly apologized to the other party before ending the call. I had even told them about a meeting at 1 p.m. Irritated, I turned my gaze towards the door. "Why did you come all of a sudden?" I asked them, maintaining my composure. My father-in-law proudly replied, "We'll pay off the mortgage, so please leave." It was hard to suppress a laugh at his statement. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law was just staying at home without any employment, yet Mark was completely in favor of his parents' opinion. Disappointed by his stance, I considered divorce. "Then I leave," I quickly replied, to the surprise of all three of them. "The mortgage of the house is $5,000 per month." With an inward smile, I began to pack seriously. Luckily, I had a business trip scheduled for a week starting from the next day. With my suitcase and bankbook ready, I headed to the entrance. "Goodbye," then I said, as I left the house. First, I'd start by transferring the house's title to Mark. I felt excited thinking about my future plans. My name is Shelley Owen. I am 47 years old and work as a web designer. I went independent 5 years ago and have been fortunate enough to receive many project checks as a result. I've earned more than 5 times my previous salary and now live on the top floor of a high-rise condo. I met Mark, my husband, 3 years ago through Ashley, my former boss. He is Ashley's cousin. He's kind and honest, but had trouble maintaining relationships, so he had been single for a long time. Around that time, my business was doing well, and I bought the top floor of a high-rise condo, doubling as an office. I wasn't planning on marrying, but Ashley strongly suggested I meet Mark. When I met him, he was very gentle and attractive, looking much younger than his actual age. He listened to me talk about my job and complimented me a lot, which drew me to him quickly. We started dating and got engaged within 6 months. My parents had already passed away, and my only relative was my brother, so my brother and his wife also attended the family meeting. From Mark's side, his parents and cousin Ashley came. The meeting went smoothly overall. However, my sister-in-law's comment, "This seems stiff," left me puzzled. I never imagined her words would become reality. After marrying, Mark moved into my house, and we started our life together. His workplace was harsh, requiring him to leave early in the morning and return home past midnight. Despite this, his salary was only a quarter of mine. I suggested to Mark, who was exhausted and went to sleep immediately every day, "It's bad for your health. Why don't you look for another job?" However, he reprimanded me with a face full of anger. "Are you saying I should quit my job? Are you looking down on me because I earn less?" I was surprised by Mark's strong reaction, as we had never argued before. Feeling uncomfortable about unintentionally disrespecting his job, I decided to apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about your health," I said. My apologies too," I overreacted. "You've always taken care of the house, and I shouldn't have scolded you." Mark quickly calmed down and apologized. Our first argument ended swiftly. However, it became difficult to suggest a job change afterward. Mark's return time got even later, and he eventually spent half the week at the office. While I was concerned about his health, he seemed to enjoy his job, so I decided to support him as much as I could, creating a relaxing environment whenever he returned home. "Hey, about my dad's medical expenses, could we increase the remittance a bit?" Mark suggested this when his father was in the hospital with back pain. Sighing inwardly at his request in his father's hospital room, I didn't hesitate to help my in-laws as I had no parents of my own. Our household depended on my income, with Mark contributing a part of his salary to his parents. His salary wasn't low for a man in his 40s, but the exact amount he kept for himself was unclear. However, it was evident he was providing enough for his parents not to struggle. I couldn't agree when he insisted on increasing the remittance because it was, in the first place, possible only due to my income. Yet it was hard to refuse in front of his parents. "Mark, you're really kind. Thank you so much. It's a big help," they said, looking at me and Mark. Under their pressure, I reluctantly agreed to increase the remittance. Afterward, my in-laws started demanding money for various reasons, not just the remittance. I wanted to refuse, but they knew I would say no, so they approached Mark instead. Especially weak to his mother's requests, Mark often decided to increase the remittance whenever she asked. And on the day his father returned from the hospital, after sending my in-laws off in a taxi, Mark and I returned home only to find, surprisingly, that his parents, who were supposed to have gone home, were waiting outside our house. "It's tough for Dad to climb our stairs, so I thought we'd take care of him here until his back is fully healed," Mark said. "What? You can't just spring that on me." My surprised reaction made my mother-in-law frown. My father-in-law stood in front of the door, as if to say, "Let us in quickly." "Mark, that's okay, right?" "Of course, don't worry," Mark replied, and I stared at him in shock. He avoided my gaze. From his reaction, I realized that Mark and his parents had already discussed this. "Fine, you can stay here until you're fully recovered," I said reluctantly and invited my in-laws inside. They looked around the house and sat on the living room sofa. "Look, they live in such a nice house. Our house is 50 years old and falling apart, right, Dad?" "Yeah, it's really run down. Getting old is tough." My in-laws conversed, and Mark just nodded. It seemed they planned to stay here for a long time. To be honest, since I was sending them a substantial amount of money every time, living together might be less of a financial burden. However, that's not enough reason to accept living together. Renovating old houses is trendy these days. "How about doing that, Mark?" I suggested. "Yeah, maybe," Mark replied vaguely. 2 years into our marriage, though it's supposedly still in the honeymoon phase, we hardly spend time together. We haven't even gone on a honeymoon, and this place was my home and office. It's fine when Mark is out for work, but my in-laws would be here all day. With them around, meetings in the living room become difficult. If we were to live together, I'd prefer moving into my in-laws' house and using this place solely as an office. Thanks to my initial resistance, the in-laws didn't bring up living together again. However, even months after my father-in-law's discharge from the hospital, my mother-in-law showed no intention of taking him back, only returning to their home to clean. Moreover, their belongings started overflowing from the guest room into the living room. "Mark, your dad seems perfectly healthy now. He even went bowling today. Maybe it's time for them to go home," I said, sensing Mark's discomfort. "What are you saying?" Mark raised his voice, and I fell silent. Seeing my reaction, Mark seemed to think that raising his voice would make me comply. He frequently insisted loudly on his opinions, though I didn't always comply. Opposing him led to my mother-in-law siding with Mark, putting me in a 3-to-1 disadvantage. This went on for 2 years. During this time, I took care of all the housework, while my in-laws often went out to enjoy themselves. Despite his back being fully healed, my father-in-law showed no signs of returning home. "Sorry, I have a meeting at 1 p.m. today, so I'll eat lunch in my room, okay. But leave the dishes for later," my mother-in-law replied without looking up. As I put lunch on the table, Mark had taken the day off and was planning to go out with my in-laws in the afternoon. He wouldn't take time off for our anniversary, but would do so on his parents' requests. Thinking this, I responded, "Understood," and headed to my office. Right at 1 p.m., my online meeting started, but about 10 minutes in, footsteps approached, and the door burst open. "This is where me and my parents live," Mark declared, barging into the room, with my in-laws nodding behind him. I hastily apologized to the meeting participants and ended the call. "I told you I had a meeting at 1 p.m., I complained internally while heading towards the door. "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" I asked calmly, only for my father-in-law to smugly say, "We'll pay the mortgage so you can leave." I struggled to suppress my laughter at his words. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law stayed at home without working, yet Mark completely supported them. Deciding on divorce, I simply said, "All right, I'll leave," surprising all three of them. The mortgage of the house is $5,000 per month. Smiling inwardly, I started packing with a serious expression. Luckily, I had a week-long business trip starting the next day. With my prepared suitcase and bankbook, I headed for the entrance. "Goodbye," then I said before leaving my home. The first thing to do was to transfer the house title to Mark, feeling excited about the next steps. I checked into a hotel and immediately contacted a real estate agent to transfer the house to Mark, including the mortgage. The transfer depended on Mark's ability to pay the mortgage. If he couldn't, he'd have to make a lump sum payment or sell the house. I accepted this and asked the agent to find me a new home and office. My work could be done from anywhere with a computer, but I needed an office for calm discussions with clients. The agent found a suitable place about 40 minutes' drive from my previous place. It was well equipped with excellent security. I viewed it and decided to buy it. Immediately after returning from the trip, it was a luxurious apartment, almost like a villa. It felt a bit too luxurious, but I considered it a reward for my efforts and decided to buy it. I could move in within a week, so I stayed in temporary accommodation until then. After all the necessary documents were ready, I left the packing and moving process to a moving company. Mark apparently hadn't been informed about the mortgage transfer. During the move, my in-laws and Mark helped while speaking ill of me. When the movers finished, one commented, "You have a difficult family," making me blush with embarrassment. A week later, after settling into my new home, I received a call from Mark. "Shyle, what's this about changing the mortgage?" he asked anxiously, with his father shouting in the background. "Tell her to come back quickly." It seemed that Mark finally understood the situation about the mortgage. "But we're getting a divorce, right? It's unfair for me to pay the mortgage if you're the ones living there," Mark exclaimed. However, I couldn't agree with him if he intended to act like they never told me to leave the house. I pressed a play button on the nearby computer, and our conversation from that day started playing. "Why did you record this?" Mark was startled. "I was in a web meeting, so I recorded it for documentation," I explained. I usually use an IC recorder for meetings and share the recorded audio after getting consent from the other party. I had mentioned this to Mark before, but he seemed to have forgotten. "Really? Is that true?" Mark sounded flustered over the phone. "So good luck with the mortgage repayments, but first, you'll have to pass the credit check," I said. "How much is the mortgage anyway?" "Can I afford it on my salary?" Mark asked, which made me laugh. I had clearly informed him about the monthly mortgage amount when we got married, and I had shown him all the documents, but it seemed he never paid attention, thinking I would end up paying. "Let's see if you can. The mortgage is $5,000 a month. Did you hear that?" Upon hearing the mortgage amount, Mark was speechless. On the other end of the phone, I could hear his mother asking, "Mark, how much is it?" Mark was too shocked to answer her question. Then his mother took the phone, and I had a new conversation partner. "Where are you?" "The mortgage can't be that much." She sounded irritated and started to tell me how incompetent I was as a wife. She insisted that I should pay the mortgage because I had caused them trouble. After finishing her rant with a triumphant tone, she said, "Don't think you can come back for Mark's salary. We won't help you any more." It seemed Mark hadn't told his parents about his actual salary. A son who sends us so much money every month can't be struggling financially. "They'll keep taking care of us, so we have no worries," his mother confidently continued. I couldn't help but burst into laughter while listening to his mother boasting. My sudden laughter angered her. I decided to give her a dose of reality. $4,000, I said. "What? The mortgage?" "No, that's Mark's monthly salary." "What? Really?" She was shocked by my words and seemed frozen for a while. But then she started laughing. "That's impossible. Mark has been sending us $4,000 every month. If his salary is really $4,000, he would have been sending us all of it." "Stop lying," she yelled, not believing me. "That's right, but I've been covering all his personal expenses and pocket money." "That's how he could send the money," I replied. "That's a lie," she yelled, not believing me. I calmly pointed her to the evidence. "Look at the shelf right by the entrance of the living room. You'll find Mark's salary slips there. If you doubt it, check for yourself." You're just lying," she said and headed to the indicated shelf. I could hear Mark trying to stop her in the background. Soon, her voice of surprise came through the phone. "What? There's not even $4,000 here. Mark, what's the meaning of this?" Mark's actual salary turned out to be even lower than I knew. I could hear the in-laws questioning Mark in the background. "You might not hear me, but just so you know, the house mortgage is $5,000 a month." "Take care," I said as loudly as possible. Whether they heard me or not, I ended the call. Mark called again several times later, but I ignored them all. "Let's discuss this through a lawyer from now on," I texted him, and then ignored any further communication. The lawyer I hired dealt with frequent contacts in the following days, which soon quieted down. I promptly filed for compensation through my lawyer. After a while, a response came through my lawyer, and I couldn't help but laugh at its contents. It seemed to be co-authored by a team of liars Mark's side had hired. Liars too, but their claims were laughable. "The allegations by Shelley are false, and the real victim is our client. We demand compensation for emotional distress." All I could say to my lawyer was, "I'm sorry." The divorce was nearing, but our relationship as a couple was still ongoing. I wanted to get away from a husband who could make such demands. "My client wants to meet and discuss in person. It seems Mark doesn't know about this," my lawyer said, handing me a letter. The letter briefly requested to verify the truth behind Mark's claims. I agreed through my lawyer and chose a location far from my current residence for precaution. At the scheduled meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark didn't show up. The lawyer was young and polite, greeting me properly upon arrival. He revealed that his client was actually Mark's mother. According to him, Mark remained silent during their discussions, keeping his head down. His parents kept accusing me, claiming I fabricated fault to demand compensation. As I listened to this, the lawyer handed me a document. It detailed the malicious actions I allegedly committed. However, the lawyer felt that it was intentionally crafted to demean me. I explained each point in detail. The opposing lawyer nodded earnestly, showing understanding. "I see the content of your statements is completely different, Shelley. You have solid evidence and a strong case," he commented. This part is reversed," he remarked after I pointed out and corrected a mistake. The opposing lawyer was visibly shocked. Once the explanation concluded, he left the room with the same politeness as when he arrived. My lawyer and I strategized to expose Mark and his parents' falsehoods. We also reached out to other relevant parties to set up a meeting to discuss compensation. About a month after the meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark and his parents arrived, looking haggard. His mother glared at me as if seeing an enemy. "You seem to be enjoying all this trouble. Who do you think is responsible for this situation?" She seemed dissatisfied with the private dining room I had chosen. It was unfortunate that she didn't like the upscale restaurant she used to favor. However, her irritation might also be influenced by the fact that the opposing lawyer, having learned the truth, dropped their defense. "Mother, you used to like this place, right?" "I thought you'd be pleased," I said deliberately. But she responded with an unhappy face. We entered the restaurant, greeted by the staff who were informed about the situation, and led to a private room. Mark didn't speak until we were seated in the room. Then he suddenly became emotional. "Shelley, I was wrong. Please help me. I can't survive like this. I'll do anything you say from now on. Please come back." Mark's parents were stunned by this unexpected plea. I smiled kindly at Mark, and he seemed momentarily relieved. However, I signaled my lawyer, who then handed Mark a document. Reading it, Mark turned pale. "What is this?" "What's wrong?" Mark struggled for words. Then his mother snatched the document, glaring at me furiously. The document contained Mark's claims, each refuted in red ink. "Shelley, how dare you underestimate us? Enough is enough." "Unfortunately, Mother, I'm only telling the truth," I replied. She gritted her teeth at my response. Suddenly, my face was splashed with water. "How dare you still act so arrogantly, even as a daughter-in-law? We tolerated your infertility, so you should be grateful and dedicated to your husband's family." To my shock, it was my father-in-law who had thrown the water. He glared at me, panting. Incredible to throw water during a meeting, especially with lawyers present. I burst into laughter at the absurdity. My laughter surprised everyone, including my lawyer. Still laughing, I responded to his anger. "Yes, it seems I wasn't the perfect wife. I had my earnings taken, was burdened with all household chores, and even though I said I didn't want children, I was berated for being infertile. I'm not strong enough to endure that, still defiant. You should understand by now. Once we're divorced, I'll have nothing to do with you. How about her as a new wife candidate? She's young, might be good for you." I signaled my lawyer, who, regaining composure, pulled out a photograph. It showed Mark entering a hotel with a young woman. "What is this?" I took it. And entering the room was my former boss and Mark's cousin Ashley. Mark was shocked and speechless at the sight of Ashley. Ashley sat next to me and handed me a handkerchief. "Uncle, Aunt, I didn't introduce Mark to Shelley to make her unhappy," Ashley said. "Mark's parents were angry about this matter, so it's likely they will reprimand his parents." Seeing Mark and his parents quiet down, I submitted the divorce application and documents related to compensation. Mark seemed to want to say something but remained silent under Ashley's sharp gaze. Promptly signing the documents, "By the way, this woman has a message for you. She wasn't aware that you were already married. She had already met with my parents and booked away wedding venue, calling this a fraud. She is demanding compensation, so be prepared." "What? That can't be true." Shocked by the decisive message, Mark began to cry in despair. Mark had been matching with the young women on a dating site multiple times. The woman in the photo was one of them and apparently deeply loved him. This revelation shocked his parents too. His father, surprised by the situation, was stunned. Actually, Ashley had investigated Mark's infidelity, explained the situation to the woman, and introduced her to a lawyer. I never met the woman directly, but I was pained by her apology over the phone. "Shelley, divorce seems inevitable with irreconcilable differences, but about the house, shouldn't the mortgage payments be considered?" His mother started. So I informed her that Mark was now the owner of the house and that it was being sold because he failed the credit assessment. No way. His mother slumped in despair. We then left the restaurant. Within a month, Ashley informed me that Mark and his parents had moved from the high-rise condo to an apartment due to his parents' spending habits. Mark's salary alone couldn't sustain them, and they had even asked Ashley for rent assistance. The compensation for both the deceived woman on the dating site and myself was being covered by Ashley's parents. Surprisingly, Ashley had started dating Mark's former lawyer. She was drawn to his decisiveness. "We never know what life will bring," she said, looking very happy. As for me, I started blogging about these events, which unexpectedly garnered attention, leading to new opportunities as a writer. Enjoying writing, I lead a busy yet fulfilling life. In fact, since the divorce, I've been strongly pursued by a corporate executive I knew through business, and recently our relationship turned romantic. He's trustworthy and has suggested we live together. But I'm still pondering my response. In truth, my mind is already made up. I just need the courage to convey my decision. Looking forward to our date tomorrow. Today I'm again seated in front of my computer.